Yeah, so I wanted to talk about this because this idea I had. Basically, I got really sick of really gory horror movies. And it was really refreshing when Kelsey was gone one day. I went back and watched, The Rear Window, which is, I guess that's not horror, that's suspense, but still.
The Rear Window?
The Rear Window? Yeah, what did I say?
No, you said The Rear Window. I'm not familiar with that movie at all.
Oh, it's a really good Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But anyways, I started thinking back on what used to really scare me as a kid. And one of the scariest things that I remember from my childhood was my dad had this suit hanging apparatus, and it had kind of like a coat hanger on top. There was a bar for pants, and then it all stood together, kind of like a little. It looked kind of like a little waiter man. It's hard to describe, and then on top it had a thing that you could put your wallet in, but it was just like a circular kind of shallow bowl that looked like just like the most terrifying head of an alien to me for some reason. And so I would have these nightmares where I would walk in to be comforted by my parents, and this thing would turn at me and just go,
Jesus Christ!
And that was the scariest, to this day, still raises the hairs on my arms when I think about it. I would really like to develop a horror movie where it was based not off visceral horror, but trying to tap into those really fundamental fears of childhood.
Of you specifically, or just general? This can get dark real fast.
Also, John, I'm super glad that you went on to describe this object, because I thought you were just going to stop at my dad.
Jesus.
No, that's way too dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That's uncharted territory for us on this podcast.
Well, yeah,
You couldn't see my face just then, but it was good.
Sarcastic, yeah.
Yes.
So this is psychological horror.
Yeah, well, I was basically the reason I told that story was I was wondering if this was a very John specific thing, or if that was a more general thing. Did you guys ever have objects that terrified you that came alive?
No, I mean, not specifically. My thing was always aliens, and I didn't know specifically why up until maybe 2 years ago, I think.
Oh, really?
2 years ago, yeah. I did not explicitly know why. I always thought that aliens would come. When I was little, I always thought that aliens would land in the backyard, would float through the locked door, they could phase shift, so you couldn't lock yourself away from them, and they would take me away. And I did not explicitly remember why this fear formed until 2 years ago when I was binge watching The X-Files on Netflix. And an episode started, and all of a sudden it the whole thing flashed before my head, before my eyes. I remember my mom's room was across from mine, and she had fallen asleep with the TV on and the door opened, and I was probably 8 maybe. And, because, The X-Files were on in the early 90s, right? So I was, it would have been 96? Yeah, so I was 6 to 8, somewhere in there, the mid-90s. And I remember, going into my mom's room, sitting down and, watching the TV, because I didn't have a TV in my room. And it was that episode. And for any of you who have watched The X-Files, it's the episode where, I guess, spoilers... it's the first episode in the series where Mully, where Scully gets abducted, and it starts out with this guy in this abandoned house experiencing an abduction, and I guess that really fucked me up because and so we cut back to me as a freaking 28-year-old, just in bed with the sheets above my head, trying not to look at what's on the screen because it's freaking post-traumatic stress disorder.
So Mark, I literally had the exact same experience as you.
Really?
Yes, where I was a terrible sleeper when I still am, when I was young, and so I would constantly sneak to the living room to watch TV when my dad was still watching TV, and he hated it because he always liked watching the X-Files, but I'm terrified of everything scary. And so I did this exact same thing as you. I watched an episode where, it wasn't that particular episode, but it was an episode where they were walking around like a park, and then they got eaten by some giant like underground like
Thing.
monster, but it was like they just fell through the ground and they were being like eaten alive.
Oh, Jesus.
And that terrified me of open spaces for a really long time. I didn't want to step on
Jesus
open grass
Christ.
for a really
How
long
have we
time because
not-
I was so terrified that it was going to happen to me. And the worst part is you can't tell your parents either because then they'll know that you're watching TV like you were supposed to. So it was just, anyways, I'm sorry. I had to share that because that's too funny that we both had terrifying X-File experiences.
So
Well, now maybe we've hit on something here. Maybe
yeah.
we've hit-
So this is what I was hoping to get to. Yeah.
yeah, maybe we've hit on, like, viewing the X-Files as... Maybe this is the new X-Files movie.
Uh-huh.
There are a bunch of movies, like, psychological horror movies that deal with, like, the perspective of things as a child.
Yeah. Those are hard. Like, I'm sure there are some that are done well. I think that's a really hard thing to, like, re-convey to an adult. Like that sensation, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, but, like, if everyone, or if people have had these kinds of experiences, then I think it might be more easily conveyed.
Yeah.
Jared, have you had any of these types of experiences?
That's what I've been trying to think about. I can't think of any. I don't remember any like supernatural fears.
Did you ever have those dreams where you were paralyzed and couldn't move?
Yes.
Like something scary was happening?
Yeah, I still do that. I still have those.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah.
I stopped having those. I don't know why.
John, the place that I thought you were gonna take this, or I guess I thought Kelsey might take it there, was that maybe creating psychological horrors, but they're like made for like you are a big horror buff. You like horror movies, but you feel like they're not good enough, and then you come to this service or group or company, and they will make a psychological horror like specifically designed for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a really good idea. It's also like thinking about what the result of that would be for me as an adult.
Sign like a million waivers beforehand.
Yeah,
otherwise
exactly. Because like
you're gonna get sued.
that shit would
Fuck you up.
might like seriously fuck you up.
I feel like it could either fuck you up or maybe
Face
both.
your fears, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like it could be very enlightening. Like even if it's not like
yeah.
like even if it's not overcoming your fears, it's like because I think the challenge. I don't know much about horror, but I feel like the challenge for horror filmmakers is really them understanding the psychological underpinnings of what really bothers people and then manifesting it. But if they make it specifically for you, then maybe you can understand like what the real underpinnings are, and that could be helpful in some way.
So it's a mixture of like an escape room company and a therapist.
Yes.
I thought it sounds to me like you're just becoming naive again.
That's a horrifying proposition.
Yes,
Wait, what do
you
you
are
mean?
correct.
Yeah, I don't understand why that would be the result of having a bespoke made psychological horror.
No, you were talking about like going back, like a service that would like erase that.
No.
Yeah.
Not erase. I'm just saying, like, so let's say John was tired of the horror movies that exist and he wants a new one made, and then the service comes and they interview John and they like follow him around for a couple months, and they
that'll do it. That's all they have to do.
But like that, so you get a movie out of that, right? And then like that's
I think
it.
it's an experience.
But what if you're able to like just hit the reset button and then everything's scary again?
Oh,
Oh no
That's
no
the
no
worst.
no. That is
that
a
in
really good
itself is
movie or
terrifying.
book idea though.
It's not a good movie or book idea because you're not sympathetic to the main character. They're like the
Why not?
stupidest person in the world. They wanted to make everything scary for them, and then they did, and now like
They're every stupid college
but
kid in a bad
listen,
B movie.
Have you ever watched any horror movies? All the protagonists are stupid. They all split up. They all do dumb things. It drives me crazy.
But that's why you don't. When protagonists are stupid, that stops me from caring. That's why horror movies are kind of usually I'm not impressed, but some of them are good.
So what if we make a horror movie where the protagonists do everything right?
Right, and I think that's part of like the psychological one is not. It's not that they do everything right; it's they do everything you would do, right? So when you say don't go in there, and then they're like, okay, I'm not going to go upstairs. I'm going to leave the fucking house.
And then something way worse happens as a result of leaving the house.
Right, exactly. So the people who are following you down, they both understand your fears. They understand like where they come from, and they understand your decision-making trees. And then they incorporate all of that into this very specific psychological horror where you...
I like that.
I really like this idea. I guess the one thing I'm a little bit worried about, did we just make haunted houses?
No, because haunted houses aren't specifically designed for you.
That's true.
Yeah, but that would also be cool.
Yeah,
a
you could also have a
specific
movie and or a haunted house made for you.
You designed a haunted house that is your constant surrounding. You don't go to the haunted house goes to you.
Oh, Jesus Christ. No, but we get sued so sued.
Waivers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Waivers and an LLC. Yep.
I think we need a name for... I don't know what it's the name of. The service, maybe. But I like this idea.
I think, it raised the hair on my arms, when I thought about it, so I think maybe we just call it Goosebumps.
I was thinking of a similar thing, it brings about, some hellish experiences, so, Hellraiser sounds good, too.
Since so many people are, afraid of the dark, it's just, are you afraid of the dark?
Yeah.
Hooray, we said 3, now we get 3
or maybe,
separate letters of cease and desist.
Maybe since they're telling you a tale, and it's a tale about something that's, scary, and maybe it's related to death, we can call it Tales from the Crypt. That's the only other one that I know.
That is pretty good.
I don't have any others.